Today I have a very special video for you. This is a conversation with Robin Gibb of the Bee Gees from the Afterlife. Hi, I'm Debbra Lupien, voice of the Akashic Records, with a message for you from Robin Gibb. The conversation begins. I asked, "What did you want to say? Do you have a message for your fans?" Robin replied, "I was quite snockered off at having an early exit. Not the way I planned it at all. Wasn't nearly finished with what I wanted to accomplish. But when your number's up, it's up." I responded, "Well, Robin, it's been quite some time now. Do you still feel the same way?" Robin said, "Actually, no. It did take me a bit to adjust, though. There's all the usual stuff to do over here, people to catch up with, lots of activities, never a dull moment, unless that's what you're looking for. It lacks the visceral feel of being in a body, which I quite miss." I asked, "Do you have plans to reincarnate again?" Robin answered, "Yeah, I expect I will. For the time being, I'm staying put until we get the band back together." I inquired, "You mean when Barry joins you?" Robin intoned, "Yeah, something like that." I asked, "What about Andy? Can he stand in for Barry?" Robin retorts, "No, they're not interchangeable. Barry's Barry and Andy's Andy." I continue, "After Barry joins you, will you make plans for another Earth life?" Robin reflected for a moment. "Probably, but we won't be in any hurry. Once Barry joins us, we'll have a lot of catching up to do, and that could take some time. Besides, there's no rush. Things are a bit rough down there right now, and I just as well skip that intensity. Once things settle down, I might reconsider." I inquired, "What about Maurice? Do you spend a lot of time with him?" Robin enthusiastically replied, "Oh, sure, we picked right up where we left off, but we were always connected, even after he passed on. Not even death can break our twin bond." I wanted to know, "Are you still writing music?" Robin quickly tossed back, "No, that can wait for Barry to get here. Then we'll make more music together. Meanwhile, there's soul classes to attend, figuring out where I went wrong, where I went right, and how I can do it all better next time around." I asked, "Any insights you'd like to share with us?" Robin quizzically mused, "Insights. Well, I suppose you ought to know that nothing is important and everything is important, each at different times. Once you get all wrapped up in the day to day busyness of 3D living, it's easy to lose sight of the real priorities." I inquired, "And what are your real priorities?" Robin thoughtfully replied, "Don't be in such a rush. Slow down. Savor the precious moments. Spend time with those who are important to you, because you never know when your expiration date is going to come around. Let yourself be silly. Let yourself experience more joy. There's never enough joy. Too much adult seriousness. Too many burdens to carry. Too much pressure. All that turns into bad decisions that can lead you right down a dark alley into oblivion." I tossed back, "Are you talking about drugs and booze?" Robin ruefully said, "Yeah, those and upside down priorities where hitting the next goal becomes more important than enjoying the ride. I can now see how important it is to slow down and smell the roses. They, like life, fade all too quickly. The next gig, record, or party will come round again, but the people you love may not. Make the most of the time you have, else one day they'll have disappeared and you'll be left holding the bag, wondering why you didn't make better choices, filled with regret." I questioned, "Were you able to release the regret once you transitioned?" Robin explained, "Not exactly release, because it leaves a void. But your perspective does shift into one of understanding that there will be another opportunity, which lessens the sting of regret. Seize the day." You hear that platitude and never quite put the pieces together to understand why that's so important until there are no more days to seize. Then, of course, there are the screwed up priorities of a hedonistic lifestyle where it's all about the next high. And I'm not just talking about drugs and booze. It's the next hit song or the platinum album, all those things that seem so important when you're in a body and can barely see beyond your own nose. I think that's one of the biggest gifts of this space is the greater perspective on everything. Man, your priorities on earth are so out of whack. but you just don't take the time to feel or see it. Crossing that threshold is a real eye opener. Some of the truths that are now evident are painful. Confused, I inquired, I thought things like regret didn't exist on your side of the veil. Robin explained, that's a misunderstanding. Yes, in time they do dissipate, but during reflection time, regrets are potent pills to swallow. I asked, how long does reflection time last? Robin replied, it depends on how much you had figured out before you transitioned. Those souls that are further along, more awakened, process through quickly, while those less enlightened take longer to process. It's like learning your ABCs so you can read versus reading an encyclopedia to bone up on a topic that you already have some familiarity with. There's a lull in the conversation. Robin, are you still there? I called out. Yeah, he responded. Anything else you'd like to say? I inquired. Sorry, Robin said. I was caught up in my thoughts for a moment. Where were we? I answered. You were talking about regrets. Robin leans in. Oh, well, enough on that topic. I do miss my kids, though, and I wish I'd been a better role model. His energy feels a little morose, which is unusual and causes me to wonder whether he suffered from chronic depression. Robin, are you able to let go of the sadness that you can move forward on your journey? I inquired. You know, I'm just not ready, he confessed. I feel there's a lot more to learn before I pick up another life. I asked, when that happens, do you think you'll be with your brothers again? Robin reflects. No, probably not. We'll still be connected, but the relationships will be different permutations so that we can learn and grow. I sure don't want to set myself up to make the same mistakes again. I questioned, do you really think that would happen? Robin replied, I'm not sure. It's too soon to tell. Check back with me in another decade or so, and we'll see. I inquired, is there something uplifting or inspirational you'd like to share to change up the energy? Robin explains, I think, like a lot of others, I do things differently now that I've completed the journey. I have a greater understanding of consequences and the reality of choice. It's not always what you think it is. Next time, I plan to slow down and savor the journey. There's a lot that passed by in a blur. Being famous isn't all fun and games. There's a lot of loneliness and insecurity. Doubtful I'd choose that path again. I wanted to know, what about your music? Robin opined, well, I might do something behind the scenes instead of being in the spotlight. Yeah, I think that could be quite satisfying. I interjected, what if I told you that from my perspective here on Earth, you did all right? None of us are perfect. It's about doing your best, learning and doing better next time. It feels like you're being way too hard on yourself. Could you give yourself a break and accept that you did way better than you think? He paused to consider, then shook his head and said, maybe. I encouraged him to make the most of his time on the other side, to lighten up and enjoy, because that's important work too. He smiled and said, okay, I'll give it a go. Then he climbed on a bicycle and started pedaling away into the sunset. Suddenly, I thought of another question and I called out after him, hey, Robin, was I started a joke autobiographical? He paused, looked back at me, winked, smiled, and said, could be. Then he set off again. After our conversation, I felt compelled to do a little research because I actually knew very little about Robin Gibb the man. I planned to have another conversation with him, but research first. I was surprised to learn that Robin wrote and co-wrote a lot of music. In fact, when the Bee Gees started out, he was the lead singer. He was quoted one time as saying that his voice was ugly, but people seemed to like it and he loved to sing. His great frustration was being sidelined by Barry, who was the leader of the band. That's what prompted him to leave to pursue a solo career. He was a committed philanthropist, and he worked diligently for causes that were important to him. He also loved studying history. At the end of his life, he was writing an opera about the Titanic with his son, Rob and John. He was a fascinating, complex man. Now it was time to invite him. to another conversation to tie up loose ends. So now we begin part two of my conversation with Robin Gibb. Paging Robin Gibb, I called out. He shot in like a rocket, obviously anxious to talk. So, Robin, why did you reach out now? I asked. He explained. Simple. I was ready. There's always so much left unsaid, and I wanted to go on the record with my unofficial life overview thoughts so that others might understand what they're up against and make more conscious choices rather than floating through life always looking for the next high point. The parts in between are equally important, and they make the highs sweeter. I commented, It's been said about you that you had the saddest face. Do you feel sad? Robin replied, Well, I wasn't always sad, but I reckon I had more than my fair share. I always felt there was something missing, and if I could just find it, life would be better. I spent my whole life searching, only to find out what was missing was me. The disconnection I felt was of my own doing. Rather than be an appreciation for what I had and my creations, I held on to the feeling of incompleteness. Now I can see that it was a skewed perspective. My work did matter, and it was enough. I can now appreciate how prolific I was in terms of music and philanthropic projects. Now I understand that feeling of something missing was lack of love and appreciation for myself. Had I only allowed myself to see the truth of all I was and had created, the hole in my heart would not have existed. I gently inquired, Did you feel as if you were in Barry's shadow? Robin responded with a sigh. Yeah, I did. He was always prettier, while I looked like an outsider. There was a lot of competition between us. I always seemed to come up short. But now I can see that I was only ever competing with myself. Had I understood, all our lives would have been better. I asked, Do you mean because of the estrangements? Robin shared, Well, yes, but even when we were together, that barrier was between us. My ego was working overtime to create friction. But it was another time, and I'm wiser than that now. I questioned, Would you say you lived your life with a chip on your shoulder? Robin quickly replied, Most definitely. And what a waste of time. That's something I'm working very hard to ingrain upon my soul so I don't fall into that trap again. Robin, do you think you'll be able to release the regret and embrace all that was wonderful about your life? With that, he beamed the most magnificent smile. It lit up his whole being. That's his big project, the thing he spent these past years working through. It made me so happy to see because it was confusing to me that he was stuck in so much of the muck from his life. His smile conveyed that he was revisiting the regret for purposes of sharing his message, but that he has actually moved on into another energetic space and has been releasing the regret. Now I understand why he was enthusiastic about being reunited with a brother who he'd had such conflicts with. He's excited to connect without the barrier between them. He's ready for the peace and love of true brotherhood that he denied himself during his life as Robin Gibb. The last verse of his song, I Started a Joke, begins, I finally died, which started the whole world living. If I'd only seen that the joke was on me. Think about what that says. He lived his life feeling an outsider, and the world would be better off with him gone. I'm so glad, Robin, that you understood now how important you were. If you haven't heard that song, I Started a Joke, go find it on YouTube. It's hauntingly beautiful. Robin Gibb was singer, songwriter, humanitarian, and philanthropist. Thank you, Robin. It was an honor and a privilege connecting with you. Robin expresses a depth of emotion that's extraordinary and sure to touch your heart. He was never the outsider he thought himself to be. Rather, he was admired and respected by his peers. I'm glad he finally learned appreciation for his gift and his contribution to the world. If you've enjoyed this conversation with Robin Gibb, would you please leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts? And also, what would you ask Robin if you had the chance? Thank you for watching. This is Debbra Lupien, voice of the Akashic Records. Until next time.